If you want to get to know a place, you need to visit the market. Seeing where people get their food, how people get their food, offers us a glimpse into the most ordinary of everyday tasks. In some ways, food is the great unifier. Everybody's got to eat. But it's not exactly that simple. Something as plain as what our grocery outings look like can actually show us differences in status, society, and class. But this is why I've often said things like, alright, whenever I'm in another country, there's something I absolutely love doing, and I'm about to go do it, and I want to take you with me. We're going to the supermarket. Gotta get some snackage. Central European grocery stores always have amazing baked goods sections. Often some of the best priced food you'll find in this area. Almdudler, Austria's favorite beverage. My love for grocery shopping in other countries goes as far back as some of my earliest trips, and I think it's accurate to say I've romanticized these visits and the way they allow me to experience a new place. Alright, so I'm standing in front of La Bodegona, and what's inside should not surprise anyone at all. It's basically, like your standard grocery store. You'll find all the things, meat section, dairy section. Like I said, you should be mostly familiar, but sometimes it's fun to look at the subtle differences, so let's go. The first half of the store looks like a warehouse full of non-food items. Household goods, kids' toys, containers. They're sort of organized, but not really in a way that feels intuitive. You kind of have to wander to find what you're looking for, unless, of course, you're a regular, which a good chunk of these people are. We're moving on to the food section, checking out these shelves and finding what we need. Avocados, peanut butter, cheese, bread. Now I noticed here they like using tape to stick together two different items like a bundle deal, which isn't too unusual, but these pairings are, here's the ketchup and hand sanitizer deal. Free spaghetti with your pancakes. If you enjoy cereal, you may also like refried beans. Oh man. I've been truly entertained by my visit to this Guatemalan grocery store, but also it's made me rethink if what I'm experiencing is actually all that representative of everyday life here. Because right across the street is a very different kind of market. And so this is a good spot to show the contrast between a more modern, contemporary grocery store versus the traditional marketplaces. Let's go. We come up on a place packed with people, full of flavor. Somewhere that gives us a taste of modern life in an ancient city. All right, and now for a different pace, I am at an open air market. You can see there's fruit vendors behind me. There's a guy selling masks. You can buy football jerseys, baby toys, all kinds of things. I've already been here to buy diapers, and it just goes to show you kind of the more, I don't know, traditional maybe, way to get what you need. At first, the narrow alleyways make the place seem small, but it contains multitudes. You can buy live animals, cleaning products. We meet some of the friendliest vendors. We come home with sandals, pineapples, diapers, a football jersey. So after getting to compare and contrast, the two different shopping experiences, I've been so much more conscious of the fact that not everybody gets their food at a grocery store. And honestly, this should have occurred to me sooner. See, my parents were part of that population. In fact, I recently had the chance to visit the exact market that my mom went to growing up. It's still around. I've been trying to estimate what percent of the world shops at these open air markets versus supermarkets, and you know what? The math really isn't straightforward. About 43% of the world right now is rural, but you've got places like Antigua, which is more of an urban setting where a lot of people still prefer the open air market. About 17% of the world live in high-income countries and about 10% live in low-income countries. So this doesn't actually tell us anything because people in both these types of countries like both types of markets. And also having 74% of the world left in the gray middle, that's a lot. And then you have the people who shop at both kinds of markets, and honestly, this makes a lot of sense. Some things are just easier at the grocery store, but a lot of other things are better priced at the open air market, and you go to the most ideal place. So while my sense of where people get their food is expanding, I do still stand by my original statement. If you want to understand a place, if you want to know how things work, you gotta visit the market. whatever that looks like. And now we know that for a lot of people, the market might look something like this. All right, I'm currently walking through a marketplace in Burundi, and as you can see, this place is packed. A lot is happening right now. People are buying and selling goods. There's all kinds of vegetables, other products too, gas, clothing, household goods. See, a very large portion of the world does not get their food from grocery stores. This is more like the setting. You can see right behind me, we've got basically your local gas station. These settings are vital for people to exchange both food and income. Now you have 800 million people around the world who are smallholder farmers, and so they grow their own food, and this is where they either sell some of their extra food or buy what they're unable to grow themselves. I love it here. I love this energy. It's a reminder that our food is grown by people, sold by people. It comes from the earth and it connects the health of our planet to our bodies. So there was a time where basically everyone would have gotten their food in a setting like this. It was baked into the rhythms and routines of life. And they became about more than just securing a meal. This is where people gathered, where societies formed and evolved. Now the rural marketplaces like this play in our world has changed quite a bit. A place like this is sometimes called a wet market, although I know that term has a bad rap these days because when you hear it, you might think of this.
Experts suspect the coronavirus originated at a wet market in Wuhan, China.
Nothing has done more harm to our mission, again and again, than wet markets.
Animals continue to be raised, transported, and traded with extreme cruelty.
I want the wild animal markets closed.
Okay, there's no getting around the fact that a few years ago the general public became much more familiar with the term wet market, kind of for the most unfortunate of reasons. Because of this, I think a lot of people associate wet markets overall with the worst examples of wet market activities. The trafficking of endangered animals, extremely unsanitary conditions, and just general chaos. Let's take a step back and think of what a wet market really is. Why is it even called that? Alright, right now I happen to be at one of my favorite wet markets. It's the farmer's market. That's only a 10-minute walk outside my front door. I know what you're thinking. You're like, that's a farmer's market. That's different. That's not a wet market, right? Wet markets are where you find like the bats and the cats in cages and things that could cause disease. And I don't know, even the term wet market, it's like how you feel when you hear the word moist. The plainest definition of what a wet market is a marketplace selling fresh foods such as meat, fish, produce, and other consumption-oriented perishable goods in a non-supermarket setting. Why do they call them wet markets? It partly originates because of the way they would keep fish and other meats fresh, just by putting them on a ton of ice, especially in Southeast Asia. As you imagine, the heat really melts things out, and so the floor just ends up super wet at the end of the day. The term also contrasts with the idea that at a supermarket you can get things like packaged noodles, ramen, rice, dry goods, and so this is the opposite. Let's go get something to eat. I got a mochi donut. Look, okay, this isn't like my weekly groceries, but this looks fun. A wet market doesn't just need to mean a crowded fish market in a Chinese alleyway. It can also be a farmer's market in San Diego, the Cairo marketplace in Burundi, the Teka market in Singapore, or the Mercado Central in Guatemala. So if we've got wet markets and supermarkets, which one is better? So I think it can be a little too easy for us Westerners to assume that as various parts of the world become wealthier and then more secure and then more urbanized, that their habits and their way of living will start to look more and more like ours. How this relates is that it assumes people will start to leave the wet market behind in favor of the supermarket, which kind of assumes that the supermarket is the direction of progress and the wet market is a little bit backwards. But as a counterpoint, think of the Teka market in Singapore. This place is a must visit if you're ever in Singapore, and it holds a lot of cultural value. You'll hear English and Malay and Mandarin and Tamil and Hokkien, and you'll find all kinds of groceries and all kinds of products, anything you need from all over the world. It's open and it's accessible for so many people. And It's anything but backwards. At the start of the pandemic, vendors from the TechCom market had a lot of perishable goods and no place to sell them, so they took to social media, performing live streams and stunts as a way to find buyers. Innovation, technology, it happens here. Or think of this, in the US, farmers markets are much easier to find in wealthier neighborhoods and suburbs, like the one I'm in right now. In a country that's by global standards wealthy and comfortable, a return to the open air market setting might mark the path towards a more sustainable future. Grocery stores in and of themselves don't automatically represent a better way of doing things. In fact, there are a bunch of ways where a conventional grocery store is at a disadvantage compared to an open air market. Most big grocery chains source their food products from all over the world. While this offers a lot of variety, it also expands the amount of carbon emissions involved in getting food to one's plate. There's so much more geography involved compared to a market where things go from the farmer to the fruit stand. Maybe like one broker in between. And you know what? I dislike the fact that this process makes me quite removed from the person who actually helped produce the food I eat, right? Like, a farmer's market has some potential to try and restore that connection. At the very least, the understanding that somebody grew this food. And while we assume grocery stores are safer, where are you more likely to find an apple that's been artificially enhanced to be more colorful? Where will you see a greater ratio of highly processed foods that are high in palm oils and corn syrups? Yeah, a grocery store in a highly regulated setting might offer some more safeguards against some extreme and rare illnesses, but it also regularly introduces some pretty harmful ingredients in the long run and kind of normalizes them. Now let's get back to our original question here, which is better, supermarkets or wet markets? Surely we just made a strong case for wet markets, but that's not a slam dunk. We're gonna get into the other side, but I just thought it was important that right off the bat we gotta debunk some of the stigma and false assumptions around what wet markets are before we dive into some legitimate critiques. Okay, so I'm not trying to say that there aren't problems with the wet markets of the world, right? You have a bunch that have live animals in cages, live animals with the capacity to introduce zoonotic diseases, live animals that really should not be traded because they're on endangered lists. But consider what a report by The Lancet determined. Most wet markets probably pose comparatively little risk to human health or biodiversity, but a few pose a disproportionately large risk. So their study suggested that wet markets could be better evaluated for risk if you divided them into categories. So their study suggests that wet markets can be better regulated and evaluated for risk if you divide them into categories. You have your wet markets that don't sell live animals, except for maybe seafood. You have your markets that sell living, domesticated animals, things like chickens. Your markets that sell dead wild animals, that's where it starts to get a bit dicey. And then you have your ones that sell all of the above, including living wild animals. And yeah, it's the last two where the problems really lie. Here's the thing, a lot of the work that needs to be done to protect biodiversity and to prevent diseases from spreading from animals to humans happens long before the market. I'm talking about habitat protection here. The links between habitat loss and the spread of disease is pretty direct. To do that effectively, you really need to work with local communities, bring them on board, get them behind the protection of species. In the field of conservation, there's too many examples where communities are seen as the problem rather than being part of the solution, holding the key to the solution. See, not all markets are the same, and when our language is imprecise, conflating one type with another, with different kinds, this triggers xenophobia against people from all around the world and their norms and their habits, particularly when it comes to regions where wet markets are the main source of food, perhaps the only source of food. So if you know me and have been watching my stuff, you probably know not to expect a simple black and white answer to a question like, which is better, supermarkets or wet markets? Things can be different without one being better or worse. Supermarkets and wet markets both have their own distinct pros and cons separate from each other. And the truth is, different markets work better in different settings, so there's a lot to take into account. Whether you get your food from a wet market or a grocery store, the question isn't so much which is better, but how can we make the process better? My interest in grocery stores and marketplaces all around the world all stems from the same place. A deep curiosity about what makes us different and what makes us the same. A respectful traveler knows, different doesn't need to mean better or worse, different can just mean different. And different is an opportunity to learn something new from each other.